My mother-in-law's stepdaughter ordered me, "If you don't obey me, you're fired." But the very next week when I placed a file in front of her, everything changed and she was forced to apologize. I never thought that one day I would be standing in my own office conference room pressed down under someone else's authority, feeling so small. But that morning when my mother-in-law's stepdaughter, Helen, raised her manicured finger toward my face and shouted in front of everyone, "If you don't listen to me, you're fired," it felt as though the very floor beneath my feet, the same floor I had held onto with 10 years of hard work, had disappeared. My heart wasn't beating, it had gone numb. Inside, I kept wondering when life had become so ruthless that I was standing before a woman with zero experience here but complete power. I said nothing. It wasn't fear that kept me quiet. It was exhaustion. Exhaustion from living a life where every decision, big or small, seemed to hang from the fingers of people who had never worried about missing a rent payment. People who had never lived in an aging apartment where the heater gave up every winter. People who had never tucked medical bills behind a checkbook just to feel for a few fragile moments that the weight of reality wasn't crushing them. Helen didn't know any of that. Or maybe she did and simply didn't care. What she cared about was power. You could hear it in her voice, that polished politeness sharpened into something cold. She had grown up around money, around dinner parties and effortless confidence. When she reassigned me from my own long-running project and handed it to someone else, it felt like she was moving a piece of furniture. As if I were a chair she could drag across the room to suit her mood. That week the office turned into a battlefield. But it wasn't loud. There were no shouting matches beyond that first humiliation. The war was quiet, constant, and deeply personal. Every evening on the train home I caught my reflection in the window, the tired eyes, the tight jaw, and I thought, maybe this is it. Maybe I should just quit. But then I would think of Felix.my son's inhaler alone sometimes cost more than I wanted to admit. Asthma doesn't negotiate and neither do pharmacy receipts. In this city, healthcare isn't easy for anyone. For a single mother, it can feel like a cliff edge you're always trying not to slip from. Quitting wasn't just walking away from a job. It was gambling with stability, his stability. I wasn't going to bow to Helen. But standing firm wasn't easy either. Then something happened that shifted everything. The company was undergoing its routine annual audit. It was the kind of background process most of us barely noticed. Compliance checks, financial reviews, signatures verified, standard corporate housekeeping. I had never paid much attention before point one night, though I was working late, reviewing documents I'd been abruptly removed from. The office was quiet, lights dimmed, cleaning crew long gone. As I sorted through archived approvals, I noticed something that made me sit up straighter. Helen's signature appeared on several authorization forms. Forms that required approval from executives above her level. Not just once. Repeatedly. At first I assumed it was a clerical error. But the deeper I looked, the clearer it became. These were decisions she had approved under her own name without proper authority. Worse, some of them violated internal compliance policies. Risky allocations. Questionable vendor agreements. If they surfaced publicly, it wouldn't just hurt the company. It could implicate anyone connected to the projects, including me. That night, for the first time since she'd humiliated me, I felt something new rising inside. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't anger. It was clarity. I understood finally that protecting myself wasn't the same as attacking someone else. Sometimes survival means walking through fire instead of pretending it isn't there. I gathered everything. Every document, every timestamp, every discrepancy. I didn't exaggerate. I didn't speculate. I compiled facts. Clean. Organized. Precise. Evidence that didn't need theatrics because it spoke clearly on its own. The following Monday morning, Helen was once again standing at the front of the conference room, irritation sharp in her posture. She glanced at me with that familiar, dismissive smirk, as if certain I was still the same cornered employee she could silence with a raised voice. This time I didn't stand across from her. I sat down calmly and placed the file on the table between us. "What's this?" she asked, mild annoyance in her tone. "It's everything you overlooked," I replied evenly. "And everything that shouldn't have been." She opened the first page. The color drained from her face almost instantly. The woman who thrived on volume and dominance fell silent. Her fingers trembled slightly as she turned the pages. The room felt different, charged but quiet. For the first time, I wasn't the one shrinking. Our director walked in moments later with members of the audit team. The file was already open on the table. Helen's eyes flickered toward them, and for the first time since she'd arrived at the company, I saw uncertainty. Real fear. The kind that comes when someone realizes power isn't permanent. It's conditional. They asked her to step into a private meeting. The door closed. 40 minutes later it opened again. Helen walked out first. Her eyes were red, not necessarily from crying but from the strain of something breaking internally. She paused when she saw me. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. The confidence was gone, replaced by something raw and unsteady. "I didn't realize. I stopped her gently. "You didn't realize," I said. "And that's the problem. Authority comes with responsibility. You focused on one and ignored the other." She looked like she wanted to say more, but words failed her. Later, the director called me into his office. He explained that Helen would be reassigned to a non-executive role pending further review. My projects would be returned to me immediately. He leaned back in his chair and studied me for a moment. "You handled this professionally," he said. "Most people wouldn't have." On the train ride home, I looked at my reflection again in the window. This time I didn't see the same woman from the week before. I was still tired. No audit erases single motherhood or overdue bills. But I was standing straighter. There was something steadier in my eyes. It wasn't victory in the dramatic sense. No cheering crowds. No grand speeches. But something had shifted. I hadn't screamed. I hadn't sabotaged. I hadn't retaliated out of spite. I had simply refused to disappear. That quiet choice, to document, to speak through facts, to protect my work and my name, felt bigger than revenge. It felt like reclaiming ground I hadn't realized I'd surrendered over the years. The ground of self-worth. Of professional dignity. My job was safe. But more than that, I was safe. That night when I helped Felix with his homework and later set his inhaler on the bedside table, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not relief. Strength. I had walked into that conference room believing power belonged to those who shouted the loudest. I walked out knowing it belonged to those who stood firm when it mattered most. Revenge may have happened in some technical sense. But what I truly gained was something I had been missing for years. My voice. And once you reclaim your voice, no one can raise a manicured finger and make you feel small again.